Hey guys, are you ready to crush the dragon? Let's get started. e4, c5, knight f3, d6, d4. We're in the open Sicilian. Black plays knight f6. There's also some accelerated dragons, for example with g6, but then after c4, white has some pretty serious static advantage because black is not able to get the d5 break in, and white doesn't need to play for an attack anymore, can just castle kingside with some space advantage, and black will be defending for a long time. We'll be covering this in the Maroczy bind section. That could also be the case if black plays knight c6, c4. Okay, so knight f6, because, if c4, he just takes the pawn, so knight c3, g6. We are now at the starting position of the dragon. So what's going on here? Well, presumably this is one of the most active Sicilians black can try because his bishop is on the active long diagonal which is unblocked by pawns. And it's also combined with play down the open c-file to pressure against the opponent's c3 knight. But in my opinion, more important, in general, is the weak dark squares on the king side, specifically the h6 and g7 squares, which were weakened by this move pawn to g6. And pawns can't move backwards, so this sort of weakness is permanent, as Sam Shanklin would make clear in his excellent book, Small Steps for Giant Improvement. Okay, but wait, hold on. This bishop's guarding those squares. Does that mean they're not weak? Well, as Jacob Agard explained in his excellent book Positional Play, there's a difference between a possible weakness and an actual weakness. A possible weakness is a weakness that cannot be exploited right now because it's defended, whereas an actual weakness is a weakness that can be exploited because you've removed the defender. So right now they have a defender on g7, and if you exchange the dark squared bishops, then this possible weakness on the dark squares will be transformed into an actual weakness which might lead to checkmate. For example, let's imagine that white exchanges the dark squared bishops and then includes the queen and rook on the attack on the h-file. This often leads to checkmate. So the plan for that is often f3, preventing knight g4, which would exchange the bishop, followed by queen d2. There's going to be pawn storm potential, but most specifically this hook, h4, h5. A hook is a move that exchanges the opponent's pawn for your pawn, and that opens lines. This is a really, really important type of move to pay attention to, as made clear by Grandmaster Axel Smith in his excellent book Pump Up Your Rating, where Chapter 1 talks about no pawn lever, no plan. And transformation of pawn structure is one of the most important ideas in chess because it changes the ideal squares for the pieces and the weaknesses. The weaknesses would be down the h-file, which can often lead to checkmate. Quite an important idea. So let's take castles kingside, bishop c4. To prevent d5, let's talk about why not d5 right away. It's such an important idea, right? I mean, it is an important idea. And here's why. In an open center, you cannot do flank attacks so easily because there's just too much activity going on. So you need to keep the center stable if it's going to be a race. And I would like white's chances in the race because black has created a permanent weakness with this move g6. And so white has a ready-made plan down the h-file. I think it was Fisher who said that White's plan has been made down to a science. Just blast open the H-file, sack, mate. And I think Larson was one of the last opponents who dared to try the dragon against Fisher. And supposedly in the Russian magazine, I can't ever figure out how to pronounce it, White was winning about 9 out of 10 games with this dangerous Yugoslav attack that I'm showing you here. But this d5 move is a typical idea that black would try to use to say, well, you're not going to get the Yugoslav attack anymore because the center is going to be way too open. And if these pawns are exchanged, then this move f3 is kind of out of place because in the open center, it would just be a little bit weakening. But to have d5 safely, black needs to have developed knight c6 and castles, and here's why. After the immediate d5, there would be bishop b5, and if you play bishop d7, then you lose the d5 pawn. And white is actually making a threat right now. So let's imagine that black had castled instead of knight c6. Like let's say castles queen d2 and then d5. Well, this simply does not work because after e5, f4, white has a serious space advantage and f3 is not out of place anymore, so white is just better. And also h4, h5 could still happen soon, not to mention just simple development and the threat on the d5 pawn, or e6 for example. So let's say knight c6, queen d2, castles, and because both knight c6 and castles has been included, knight c6 in order to prevent pawn to e5, and castles in order to make bishop b5 not a pin. Black is now threatening to play d5, and as a result, I recommend white plays bishop c4 to prevent it. Actually, white can allow d5, technically there's some new theory here, but it's not going to be the Yugoslav attack, trying to exploit the g6 weakness, or the weakness on the dark squares. It's going to be playing for something completely different altogether. So I don't like that as much as of now, so I play bishop c4, and after bishop d7, castles queenside, rook c8, we get our usual position. And Both sides have more or less finished their development. Black is hoping that the pressure on the long diagonal and open file will give him a dangerous attack, especially with combined with either exchanging off this knight for the bishop or preparing a pawn storm on the king side. Whereas White's plan in general is to move the king off of the open file just to be safe, followed by a pawn storm on the king side. You want to open the h file for your rook, you want to exchange the bishops, and you want to checkmate on the h file. Sometimes you include this move pawn to g4 as well, and we're going to cover the details in the theory section. I'll see you soon.